What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening with the overall earnings that just came out, what's happening with news involving Tesla, and what you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I begin to down all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am personally not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 7 free stocks, and the offer ends very, very soon in just about 3 weeks. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening to the market. Tesla's currently on a downtrend right now. We had this high all the way up here at this 200 area. We kind of rejected right here, and we established a lower high and we continue to fall. So Tesla's continuing to dip as of right now, but we have to be watching to see what happens with this current trend moving forward. But I'm going to break down more details about it. I'll be talking about SPY and the others in just a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about what's happening with the markets. So for tomorrow, it's going to be Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Please remember that an hour before the market opens, we have initial jobless claims coming out, continuing jobless claims, and also more data. Then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 4-week and 8-week bill auctions, not to mention Dowley from the Fed giving a speech at 2 p.m. So lots of data is coming out throughout the day. I just want to call that out, and I want to make it very, very clear. And all of this could affect the market, at least to some extent, but the main time to be looking for volatility is going to be at 8:30 a.m. when we have the jobless claims coming out, and also at 11:30 a.m. when we have the bill auctions. So watch for volatility at those times, Eastern Standard Time. Anyways, for more news, we just had earnings come out. We had ARM and Airbnb announce their earnings. And then for Thursday, we also have Roblox, Warner Bros., and a few others. But the main ones right now to talk about are ARM and Airbnb. So ARM, unfortunately, their annual revenue forecast did not really impress investors, and shares are tumbling despite what they announced. They ended up actually beating expectations for what we were expecting for this quarter, but for its full year guidance, it kind of underscored the uncertainty around the pace of the built out and also the AI computing and such. So that's not the best of news for them. So what's happening over here is for the current fiscal quarter, ARM's forecast and revenue was between 875 to 925 million. That's at the midpoint of 900 million compared to what the average analyst estimate was at 857 million. But when it comes to their full year expectations, we're looking at between 3.8 and 4.1 billion for their revenue, with that being at a midpoint of about 3.95 billion. That is below the expectation of just under 4 billion. So their expectation was a little bit weak over there. Their full year EPS was actually very close to expectations, but their revenue was not the strongest. And that's the reason why the annual revenue forecast failed to impress investors and the share price is down. On top of all of this, I just want to call out that we also have Airbnb announcing its earnings, and what they announced was not the best of news. So, even though EPS was a beat at 41 cents per share, they beat expectations. Revenue was at $2.14 billion above expectations. Overall, they said that the revenue in the second quarter will come between $2.68 to $2.74 billion, and analysts were expecting at least $2.74 billion. So, there's opening up the possibility that their overall revenue may not be as strong as expected for Q2. And that's part of the reason why the share price is down despite the increases we saw in the current quarter. So guidance was weaker than expected. They had weaker than expected guidance, and that's why the share price ended up dipping quite a bit for Airbnb. Now, a few more things before I break down the charts. The fear and greed index is currently at fear. Market is still kind of fearful. We're kind of adjusting that for now. Momentum is still greedy as we're seeing buyers stepping in, but we're starting to see big changes over here. For the puts and call option positioning, this is currently at neutral. We're at this 0.8 ratio. So that's actually very, very important because we're going to have to wait and see if this bounces or not. And market volatility is also kind of neutral as we're starting to see this tip a bit. So it's not necessarily the end of the world, but the VIX is at a key support. Within a week, it is going to likely bounce, in my opinion, depending on where we end up landing tomorrow. And we'll have to see how that ends up affecting the markets. For Tesla is being investigated for securities and wire fraud for self-driving claims, according to the Justice Department. It's examining whether Tesla misled consumers, investors, and regulators about its promises for fully autonomous vehicles. That's why the share price is down quite a bit. There's also news coming out that the NHTSA, which is a separate entity, is also pressuring Tesla to provide more and more data about their FSD because they're still finding more crashes, linked to FSD being used in autopilot. So that's a little bit more bearish news. There's been some news about their next layoff wave that's coming out. So it's a little bit more bearish. So the majority of news has been quite bearish for Tesla, with especially with these new investigations and the Department of Justice and all these other things just getting involved. So that, in my opinion, is more bearish for Tesla. This is why the share price ended up dipping the way it did. Now, despite the fact that Cantor Fitzgerald gave Tesla an overweight rating, Tesla was doing very, very well beforehand, but now things are starting to slow down a bit, at least for the share price, because of this negative news. That is why the price Peers ratio is dropping. Tesla's losing strength relative to the market. Fridays are not Fridays, Thursdays tend to be green about 47% of the time, so it's not the strongest day of the week. And we tend to see more volatility at 10 a.m. and also at around 1 p.m. Then don't forget there's also more volatility around May. It tends not to not be the strongest of months, but June is historically one of the strongest months of the year for Tesla, especially when we have the next reports coming out. So with that being said, that's what we're seeing for Tesla. Right now, volume is at about 80 million. That is currently a little bit below average. And with Tesla's volume dipping, it's still continuing to see more shorting, and we're still seeing shorts piling in and kind of affecting the share price. So that being said, guys, let's break down what's happening with all the charts from this point on. Looking at Tesla right now, the share price is bearish. I'm going to be quite frank with you. We ended up pushing, like I said before, to about this 200 area. We rejected, made another lower high relative to this high. We were supposed to try to continue to fill this imbalance, but we ended up failing. It rejected because of lots of bad news that came out for the past 2 days, from the NHTSA to layoff news, not to mention the Justice Department all getting involved. And that is why the share price is still bearish. Now we have this gap to fill. We haven't fully filled the gaps. That tells me that there is a risk of more downside coming later, and we'll have to wait and see how it goes. We have resistance currently at 175. We'll have to see how it ends up reacting to that. And our support happens to be all the way down towards 172, 170, and all the way down to 167.5. Overall, Tesla is on a downtrend. We got this big rejection right over here, and it's looking a bit more bearish. So this could lead to more downside as well. I think that there's a very good chance that that could be more serious. But for Tesla, with this little rejection that's coming, I just wanted to make it very, very clear that this could continue to dip. Looking at the current technicals, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow, since we have this liquidity grab, we do try to rebound a little bit. Could retest 176, but there is a risk of it coming all the way down to 172 after that. Now, this is also dependent on the news, and so far the news has been more negative, so the odds do favor Tesla dipping a bit more towards that 172 area. Now, I also want to call out that on the daily time frame, if I pull up the daily chart like this, you can see that Tesla it actually dipped a bit today, tried to rebound a bit, but it failed to break 175. So could Tesla try to push a little higher? Like I said before, try to push a little bit higher to try to fill this gap and then reject back down to 172? Or is it going to just reject from here? We'll just have to wait and see. But so far, it's been downtrending. It hasn't fully filled this gap on the daily. So it might pop a little bit and eventually come back down. There is a risk of Tesla getting a slight rejection, in my personal opinion. The daily chart on SPY, first, we kind of rejected here. Now we're getting bought back up again. So we actually have a range on SPY. I'll be watching to see which way we break for the range to determine which way it goes. But the QQQ, on the other hand, is looking a little bit weaker than SPY. It is trying to rebound too. So we'll just have to wait and see if we come down to fill this gap or not. So I'll break down more details about the levels in just a minute. But excuse me, once again, guys, for Tesla, Tesla is still in a very, very critical place. I'll be watching to see where it breaks. It may attempt a little rebound tomorrow in the morning, as long as there's no bad news, before it continues to sink lower to 172. And we could even lose that and dip a bit more because the trend is still bearish for now. But watch and see just to be safe, and we'll see how things go moving forward. Now, for SPY is very simple. We have a range that's been established. In my video yesterday, I said we might see a little dip on SPY. I was correct, but I would say not entirely. So we did dip. Yes, we did. I was correct about this move to the downside that came. SPY hit the 514s, but then the buyers came back and they ended up actually pushing SPY back up. And we got a very, very flat close. We're actually up almost 0%. Almost 0%. We're just completely flat. So overall, yes, SPY is actually on a slight downtrend technically, but this could change depending on which way we break. So if we're bearish on SPY, okay, we have this high rate here in the 518s. We come down, establish a lower high around 517.7. Then we start dipping down to 515 again. If we lose that, we turn bearish, and we're going to easily fall to the 513.5 area. If we're bullish, this liquidity grab right here where this wick is going to act as our nice little pivot area. And that pivot area is going to lead to this pushing all the way up to 518 again, break the high, and we're going to 520 in my opinion. So what do I think is going to happen, guys? At first, I did see a move to the downside coming in my video from yesterday, and that is what happened. We did get the dip technically, But that when we opened up and the SPY was down there, that is when the profit taking opportunity came before the buyers stepped in again. So we're still technically speaking in a range right now. We got bought up at 515, we got rejected off 518, and we're just going back and forth because SPY was completely flat for the day. It kind of dipped in the morning, came back up, and it just traded sideways for the entire day. This tells me that right now we're range bound, and whichever way we break will determine what the big move is. Now, let me call out the VIX. The VIX is currently very close to the 12s. When you look at the charts, every single time we hit the 12s within a week, the VIX does tend to bounce. So I think that SPY will get a rejection most likely within a week from now. Within a week, it may take some time, so we have to give it the time it needs. But right now, there's no sign quite yet that the VIX has bottomed. We're getting very close to critical support, which is where it's bounced almost every single time this year. But usually it hits like 12 to 12 point, somewhere in the 12s, around 12.5 usually. And we tend to bounce after like a few days. And sometimes it's like it takes like a week for us to get that bounce. But I just want to make it very clear that the VIX will most likely bounce soon within a week. It's going to likely get a bounce. So I think within a week, this shows us that SPY will get a rejection. Don't know exactly where yet, so we have to give it some time. But anywhere in the 12s, it does like to bounce. So we just have to wait and see. All right. So for SPY, could we try to push higher? It's possible, but I'm not going to guarantee a direction yet. We are kind of losing bullish momentum, but everything could change depending on jobless claims. So if we break 518, we could go a little higher. If we lose 515, we're going to likely dip, regardless of what happens. Okay, regardless of what happens. If the top is in, then yes, we're going to start downtrending from here down to 513. But if we break a little higher, yes, we could go higher, but the move is not going to last because we are going to reject on SPY eventually, according to the VIX. So I hope that's very, very clear. A rejection for SPY is going to come very soon. Either we reject here, or if we do try to push a little bit higher, then we will reject later and see a little pullback. That is what I'm seeing on the charts as the most likely possibility. For the QQQ, this is looking a little bit weaker than SPY as we're losing momentum, but we still have this range to be watching for. We have 441 as resistance and then 439 as support. If we break 441, we're going to be looking for a push for 442. If we break 439, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 437. So in my personal opinion, we had this high right here be established at 442, came down a bit, established a lower high, and we could dip even lower. And overall, this is kind of turning a bit, so it's very important to talk about this. There is a little bit of weakness on the chart compared to that of SPY looking at the price action and the after hours. But just to be safe, I'll wait and see what happens to the price action. I'll see how we end up opening. Now, just like SPY, I think the same thing could be said about the QQQ. Either the QQQ is about to start dipping all the way down to about 435 or even lower, or what could be happening is we're about to get one more push higher and we're about to establish a lower high all the way up here, and then we get the rejection. So I'll just be waiting to see how it goes. I'm going to be very mindful of that nonetheless. Nvidia is looking a little bit weak right now, but we have a range to be watching for. 908 as resistance, 892 as support. This range right here, we could end up losing support right here at our 20 EMA. If we lose this, we're going to be dipping. We do look a bit more bearish right now, so look for a little pop in and a drop like move, and the odds do favor the downside. Apple will be the last one of the main five I talk about. Right now, we're kind of range bound. So we have 181 as support and we have 183 as resistance. For the last 4 days, it's been back and forth price action. That's all I see Apple doing for now. And we'll have to see which way we break for the bigger move. Otherwise, we're just kind of stuck in very, very sideways. For Neo, I know a lot of people are interested in this. It looks bearish. We have a head and shoulders like structure. I think the 200 EMA is going to be tested at this $5 area. So look for a little dip on Neo. May pop first before it ends up dropping. So we'll watch and see if that ends up being the case. For Palantir, we're looking a bit more bearish. We could actually test 21 flat. We're kind of trading sideways in this range, but I do see a little dip potentially coming. For Supermicro, we have this range right over here. We have 800 as support, and we have resistance currently at this 830 area. But if we end up losing 800, we could be dipping even lower. If we break past this resistance, we could push higher. I would say Supermicro is just trading sideways just to see. I think personally it's going to actually dip to the 20 EMA, like 807, and try to rebound. So we'll have to see how things end up going. For Rivian, in my personal opinion, is trying to push higher. I think it might actually try to go up to about 10.5, and then it could reject from here. But look for a little push higher before it tries to fight resistance. Look for a pop and drop like move on it. So far, it's very flat, just stuck in a range. So we have support at about 6.9 for like the 6.9 area. We have resistance at about 7.15. We've been going back and forth this entire time, and we'll see what happens. For the IWM Russell 2000, we have a potential head and shoulders like structure. If we lose 202, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 200 and even lower. If we actually hold this, we could bounce. In my opinion, it looks a little bit more bearish, but I think we're going to be retesting 202. If we bounce off this, we could actually invalidate the bearish signals and bounce. If we lose 202, we turn bearish. So watch and see what that does. But I do see a little dip coming. For AMD, if we lose 152.9, look for 150 to be retested as we have a gap to fill. If we break past 154, we're going to be bouncing. There is a risk of this dipping just a little bit, in my personal opinion. For ARM, in my personal opinion, is dipping over here. We have support currently at 95, and we have this resistance at 100. We're kind of stuck within this area right now, but I do think that there's a risk of this kind of dipping a little bit more if we end up losing this support right here. For Coinbase, in my personal opinion, it's kind of stuck within this range. We have this support at this 207 area. We have resistance at this 220 area. We'll have to see which way this breaks as we're just trading sideways, but I believe that this might actually dip towards 207. If we lose support there, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 200. If we hold 207, we could rebound to 217. So watch and see which way we break just for confirmation. For Amazon hit 190 exactly as we predicted in my earlier videos. Now we're dipping a little bit. I could be looking for a test of about 186. If we bounce off this, then we could be pushing back up to 190. If we lose 186, we're dipping down to 183.55. So look for a little dip on Amazon and watch to see if we get a bounce off our 20 EMA or not. I find that to be very, very probable. Meta is a little bit stronger than what I was expecting. We're at the 200 EMA. If we break through this, then we're going to be going up to about 180. If we lose 47, did I say 180? Sorry, guys, 480 would be our target if we actually break 472. If we reject off 472, we're going to be dipping down to 462. We're kind of stuck right now, fighting against resistance. So give it some time and we'll see how it ends up doing. For Microsoft, if we dip a bit, watch support at 406. If we lose this, we have a dip coming to about 400. If we hold this 407, 406 range, then we could bounce. But I see a little dip coming first beforehand. For Google, I think that this is going to test 169. If we lose that, look for 166. If we hold that, we're going to bounce, but look for a little dip by 2 points on Google and see if we bounce or not. For the VIX, we're dipping right now. It is still technically bearish speaking, but even though it could dip a little bit more, we're at this support. Anywhere in the 12s, this thing loves to bounce. It loves to bounce off whether it's 12.7, 12.8, 12.5. It loves to bounce in the 12s. It's done this every single time this entire year. So that suggests to us that the VIX is going to eventually bottom and bounce soon. And we also have a falling wedge developing on it. So we will see once the VIX gets its breakout, that's going to determine a much bigger move for the markets, and that will see, a big shift. The 10-year Treasury yield will shift depending on what the Fed says. This is not really affecting the market as much. It's actually kind of up today, but it doesn't really matter. We have a gap to fill below, which could be bullish. It could also try to break the 50 EMA, which would be bearish for the markets. We're just waiting to see. The dollar index is also in a very critical place. This could be forming like a cup and handle like structure. If it fills this imbalance and goes up to about 105.7, that could be a little bearish for the markets. If we lose support at 105.5, we could dip, and that could be bullish for the markets. So we'll just have to wait and see. For Tesla, guys, a lot of the news has been very negative. The share price is just kind of weak right now. So yes, I think there might be an attempt to rebound a bit, and then we could end up dipping down to 172 or lower. So look for a little pop and drop like movement. We'll be very, very patient as time goes on. With that being said, I really appreciate every single one of you. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day and peace out.